Good evening, everyone, and welcome to one of our last few workshops of this semester. The semester's flying by, spring is just flying by, and tonight we'll be talking about negotiating the job offer. And it's a pleasure to meet some new faces, even at this juncture in the semester. I'm Tina Lynn. I'm the student career advisor and am a part of a large team that is here to support you in your career journey. And so you might have met a bunch of my colleagues last week at on Friday's career fair, as well as those of you who are CSA, Career Skills Academy students, work with a bunch of the program advisors and the special assistants there. And we'll be recording tonight's event in case anybody drops off and needs to rejoin in or would like to refer back to this information. And there will be three parts to today's presentation, where the first part is just going to be the PowerPoint of information and ideas on the three phases in the negotiation that we'll cover today, from research, preparing your case, to closing the deal, and the tools and best practices in each of those. But really the place where this information will be applied is in connecting to your community here at CUNY SPH. And so we'll be practicing through discussing scenarios in breakout rooms. And I feel like that's pretty much the heart of the matter. And so I hope that all of you will stay for that and also enjoy that time together. And then we'll regroup to debrief on things that were discussed, as well as close out and have some time for Q&A. And that during that time when we do breakout rooms, it's just best that to have the video camera on if you're able to, and having a face to the name is always great. And we understand that our students, if they're working or at different places, just let us know, and like whether or not you can speak up, or if you can use the Zoom chat, that would be great. And just taking space if you're quieter, or making space to be that active listener, just to give everybody in your room a chance to chat. And as always, we really value that inclusive environment and creating that together. And so as we get into just thinking about negotiation and defining this kind of discussion that is happening, right? And kind of this sort of almost like winding road. Sometimes it's not a straight shoot, but it's aimed at getting to reaching an agreement together, right? So, kind of all the different phases of that, and ways that we can kind of unpack that together. And just a quick look at some of these negotiation statistics. I'm just curious, like if people find any of these statistics like interesting too, right? Where not even half of people that are surveyed actually negotiate salaries, right? And that in the statistics also showing gender difference, where there are more men that identify as men may tend to negotiate more than women will. What's kind of interesting is that the younger workers, ages 18 to 34, are more likely to negotiate. I guess as this has become more of something that is more commonplace, that it's great that the more are doing so. And kind of like other identity factors that might go into why why the majority may not negotiate, right? Like, is being in a minority group, and that sort of a thing. And kind of like, living in New York State is also one of the reasons why people may negotiate, right? And some of the things that we were looking at earlier in our career journaling activity is kind of like, what are the challenges that you envision in negotiating an offer? Like, if anybody feels free to share in the chat, the Zoom chat, or raise hand, would be interested in hearing some feedback on that, or what you think could be some reasons why the majority of people don't negotiate. Anybody? Yeah, like just experience, right? Like it's the first full-time job that you're getting into. So you might not negotiate because it's just like, oh, well, what's the leverage, right? Or somebody else mentioned having the confidence to do so. Yeah, and others is somebody else mentioned kind of the fear of not getting the job, right? Like that there's this risk factor in it, and totally like all of that kind of goes into play. And somebody else is writing about situations where one was passed over for the job because they didn't want the salary negotiation the negotiation process to go past their budgeting limit, right? So yeah, like a lot of these are kind of go into sort of those challenges and like uh, kind of like having that confidence to approach this in self-advocating and presenting that ask with that polite and professional tone. I mean, there's a lot of like windy steps to even get to that stage, right? And so, we're all here in the same room, looking at the same question and trying to build these muscles together. And so even like this whole thing of deciding even whether or not to negotiate, right? Like because it is a risk, and so kind of like it's not something that's mandatory, but do the options outweigh that risk? And how far along are you in the process, right? Like, especially negotiating with employers that you plan to accept if it goes well, and kind of like also other opportunities where you can kind of leverage multiple offers to sort of get a higher salary with a different organization. And kind of like looking at some of these first two phases, one of doing research, both in the marketplace and on yourself. And then the second phase of kind of preparing yourself to engage in the negotiating kind of conversation. And so let's kind of like break this down a little bit further, right? Like, you know, in researching kind of like how sweet is the deal, like you uh, within the industry sector, kind of like these are kind of all the different components of what to research, right? Like the industry sector and what are kind of the range of salaries typically offered in the field at this level in this particular type of company or organization and at the position like level of it where it's at, and like maybe what other benefits does this type of company offer, right? Like from healthcare, retirement, contributions. There's monetary value as well as non-monetary value, and also like thinking about um, researching yourself, right? Like, what is your value added contribution? Like, reflecting upon your skills, your qualities, your experiences that uniquely qualify you for this role. And um, also thinking how would you prioritize this particular job in comparison to other opportunities that you've recently applied for, might be interviewing for, and might be at different parts of the process. And so, kind of like thinking about that research, uh, a similar job title and might have a wide salary range across a spectrum of types of organizations, right? So, like maybe a similar job in a not for profit might not it might pay more maybe in a governmental organization because maybe there's more different levels, like an analyst one, a senior analyst, or that sort of a thing, right? So there might be a wider range of salaries. Or maybe if it's like a private organization, maybe it's a private hospital, or maybe a pharmaceutical company, or like a corporate organization. Those might have higher salaries within those types of organizations, but it might be for a similar job. And so doing that research across all of these, and also like that's why job descriptions are such great data. And these days there typically is that salary range. So it's great to like use this while you're even looking for jobs to apply to, using that as time to research. Well, what's a general industry range across the spectrum, right? And what other benefits are there? Like in this, you might not know until you move forward into the interview process, right? But like basic like understanding of like if they have healthcare coverage, and sometimes they'll even list that in the job description as well. Other aspects of like retirement contribution, sort of like paid time off. There might be more paid time off in a governmental agency or a nonprofit versus like a corporate. And you know, there could also be tuition benefits. That a lot of our students here work full time and come to school part time because their company also has these tuition benefits to take advantage of. Other private companies, they might offer signing bonuses or also stock options, especially for those that are like in the startup community, right? Like you know, if it ever goes public or that sort of thing, and kind of like, you know, also non-monetary perks, right? Like if there's flex time involved. But there's like a lot of variety of what's in a job offer that is not just salary, that is beyond salary. And kind of like another way to think about researching this, especially, you know, in addition to the marketplace value, like what is it across the industry and different types of companies and for that position level, it's yourself. Like, what are your personal priorities in what you love to do with your career values, your passions, your interests? Combining that with your value contribution with regards to your skill sets and your experiences, and thinking how can, as you reflect upon those things and tie that to this job description at hand, able to leverage this into kind of that marketplace value. And so, you know, today's conversation is really sort of a continuation of things that we have been discussing all year round. And so in case you missed it, our Handshake Resource Library has, you know, like our workshop on career values. If you're a CSA student and want to do that career values activity together, like schedule that with Taylor. Breaking into public health. We talk about that research landscape mapping. And so if that is something that you can kind of utilize more support for, refer to that workshop. And I think like earlier before when we were talking about, well, what are our challenges in even, you know, approaching job offer negotiating, kind of like that idea of that having that sense of self-advocacy and being able to assert oneself professionally. We also did a workshop on that. So feel free to like go back to those resources and think of this as a continual muscle building, career skills muscle building journey. And so, you know, as you're researching the marketplace and gathering this data around the salary range of expectations, like spectrum across different organization types and that sort of a thing, like also thinking about yourself, right? Like, well, and the key is kind of to having 3 numbers in mind where you're only sharing 2. So the one number that you keep to yourself is that bottom line walk away point. Like, what is the lowest that you can possibly go for, you know, that you're looking for in kind of like job as you even applying to jobs, right? And then between the desired and the aspirational, those are kind of the numbers that you can kind of consider and in the discussion, in the negotiation discussion. And so kind of like that aspirational salary is sort of like at the top end of the range, and that desired salary will be something within their listed range, the employer listed range, and kind of like something towards your aspirational, right? So how do you move through these 3 ranges of numbers and keeping those numbers in mind? And other salary research tools, there's like a number of them out there, Glassdoor, PayScale, Salary.com, like ONET is also a good one. These Indeed also has things. So those can also be helpful. And really, like, again, these job descriptions are also really helpful too. And like in terms of as we move into phase two, like negotiating that offer, how do you determine what to negotiate and prioritize, right? Like that it's not just merely salary that you might be negotiating. Sometimes it might be like the work format. Maybe it's telecommuting. Maybe there's multiple different offices, right? And other things could be kind of like that flex time and that sort of a thing. So kind of like thinking through, well, what would you want to negotiate, whether it's monetary or non-monetary. And so kind of like getting started in the negotiating process, it's sort of like this is always something that's better done in a conversation. Like ideally, it's either in person or like Zoom face to face, that sort of thing, where you can kind of read nonverbal cues. The second best option is having a phone or a Zoom audio conversation, right? The thing to not do is do this over email, right? Like because email or like, and definitely not text. So, because like these sorts of like written communication is very one-sided timing wise and binary almost, right? Versus conversations are a bit more fluid and can kind of take different directions. And that's where you want to like be able to explore and navigate as many of those options as possible, versus you don't have that option when it's just in writing over email or text. So setting up that time to talk, and like an example of just like using an email to set up that time would be great, right? Like just thanking them if you've been giving an offer, and like if just mentioning that you have some questions that you'd like to discuss, and kind of like providing options of some times that work with you, or but basically sharing your desire to have a further conversation about all of this, to sort of iron out some details and get some of your questions answered. And so like in stepping into that conversation, sort of like starting with that attitude of gratitude and kind of expressing all the things that you are excited about in this role. And the other part is that as you've reflected upon how you sort of like align your skill sets and your experiences to this particular the work at hand, right? Like how to prepare your case and present the research that you've done in the marketplace and about yourself, right? And to ask that question and kind of like giving breathing room for that to marinate, and kind of like there are different options that this can go, right? Like, and salary is usually like one of the first items, but are there other things besides like non-salary, non-monetary items that you'd like to bring into the conversation? This is also a time to bring these up. And another benefit of just kind of using this conversation to it's almost like before you even accept an offer at a company, kind of like this can also be a chance to see how much the employer is actually setting up their employees for success, right? Like, and give you a view into like, well, what might be required and expected within this job, and what are the things that you can kind of look forward to as you step into it. So kind of like thinking through these things and having things in your back pocket so that you have these playing cards to bring into the conversation, and this listing of things, and like prioritizing what's important to you, what's most important to you, versus like what you can kind of like let go and maybe revisit at another time, right? And kind of like closing it out with taking additional time if needed to like consider those final terms, and thinking about that timeline and kind of moving towards that agreement, and the timeline of when and what and how together. And so as we kind of get ready to move into breakout rooms, and let me just take a minute to make Caroline my co-host. Hi, Caroline. Second. Just a reminder about our community agreement, and here are some instructions for as we move into this time that, if you could introduce yourself, share if you've had an experience in negotiating a job offer, or heard some advice that you want to try out, and kind of like any other questions that are coming up, or and just taking note and learning from each other. And some of the scenarios that will that you can decide in your group what you'd like to talk about is sort of like, maybe it's very early on in the interview process, right? And you're asked the question, well, what salary are you seeking? How do you respond to that? How do you prepare your response based off of sort of some of the things that you've learned from today's presentation, or discuss that together, and grab a select a representative to share that back to the large group when we debrief. Another one is that you've been offered your dream job. And granted, these salary numbers are just like, they're just kind of fictitious. You could actually make them whatever you want them to be, but just for the sake of the example, right? So an offer is for 70K, and your research shows that it's like 72 to 77. Your walkaway point is 60. Sort of like thinking through sort of those three numbers and how you would approach this conversation, this response in a offer negotiation conversation. And so we're gonna get ready to go into breakout rooms. Does everybody have the activity sheet? These scenarios and the breakout room prompts are on the activity sheet. Any questions before we break out? Everybody ready? Any thumbs ups, signs to go? Great. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Amanda. And yeah, so if you're able to turn your camera on at this time, that'll be great. Experience negotiating before, and what are some helpful takeaways that you've learned from this presentation, or which of the scenarios you discussed? Who would like to go first? We'll take 3 volunteers. So we'll cover half the rooms.
I can start.
Thank you, Nina.
So Nisa and we went over the second scenario, and we were talking about how, if you get this offer and your research is showing you that you should be offered more, you have to have the confidence to, know your skills, know how good you are, and just, understand that it's okay to ask for more money and you're worth it. Because, well, I was saying on my end, like, for example, if you end up not asking and you could have, then when you're like in the role and like you're exceeding expectations, you're doing everything you could have, you're like, I wish I would have, asked for the compensation that I wanted or that I felt I deserved.
I love that too, because it's kind of like, say maybe you didn't get a chance to move through this process during the interviewing and accepting and that sort of thing, and you're in the role already. Now, instead of dealing with the woulda, coulda, shoulda, just be like, well, you know what, I know better now. So then there's another opportunity, even to like, not now we're not talking about the job negotiations. Maybe it's like the salary negotiations or the promotion negotiation. That's sort of like an ongoing type thing, like when to utilize this, and kind of like that confidence factor, right? Like doing that research on the marketplace and on yourself, and kind of like having those facts of your skill sets and how that aligns with the job, and how you're like slaying it in the workplace, right? That it is gonna that you can tie those facts to these figures, to these numbers and stuff like that. Thank you so much. Anybody else from your Zoom room, like which scenario did you pick? What was something interesting that you heard from today's presentation that you want to try out, or anything else that came up?
From our room, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm on my phone, so I can't always tell. Me and Jaron talked a little bit about the second one, and we discussed a little bit like it. I think it really depends on your employer because I've only had experience working for like a nonprofit,
Mm,
and I've found that nonprofits, I should say, multiples. I've only found um, well, I found that they can be they can really negotiate some things, but not others. Like one thing was like money is really tight at a
mm,
nonprofit, but like
mhm,
they could give me more flexibility or like give me
mhm,
like if they offered me a number that was below my range, I came
mhm.
back and asked for like just an extra day like remote. And so
Great.
I think there's other things like and I've also had experience asking for like a better benefits package if they were giving me less money and so on and so forth. So I think there's like a lot of different things you can add to your arsenal of like what you can negotiate with. And I think in my experience, nonprofits are a little bit more flexible than like corporations are, I would
Yes.
guess, but that's worked for me in the past.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's so important. It's like, all of the range in your arsenal of things that you can bring to the table, if you've had a chance to think about what's important to you and how to present that. I love that, because it's not just about the salary, that monetary aspect, but also including the non-monetary, the perks, the work-life balance, or and that it really depends on the company, right? Like knowing the type of organization that it is and sort of what leeway this institution has, right? Because if it's smaller and more nimble, there might be more flexibility. But if it's more like established or rigid, there might not be a lot of wiggle room, right? So like kind of being able to read the room, tell the vibe, and kind of incorporate those sorts of aspects into your research and into how you prepare to engage in bringing those things up. Thank you. That was a great one. One last one, place. Such good stuff. I think we had a couple of rooms that had three people in a room, so a lot of good chatter in those rooms. Anybody from that room want to share? I think something that I heard that was helpful was somebody who is sort of working in at like a public health adjacent role right now, and considering how this information can kind of be applied as they step into breaking into like public health roles, and sort of like even as you're thinking forward into the future, kind of like even using your experience here and now to think about ways to build your experience, not just in the task at hand, but getting to know other areas, other departments that might be closer to public health roles, right? And kind of learning from other departments and kind of leveraging that as part of your experience, and not just your own role, but your engagement with the larger company at hand, and how that could be information and experience to add to your arsenal in conversations as you move into public health. And so it's just like, yeah, there's different places that you can kind of apply some of the tools on research, market research, and self-reflection into every single phase of the job search, starting from reading job descriptions in the application process, right? And being ready to go, even in the interview process. Sometimes the first questions that they might ask are, what's the salary range? And, being cautious that you've read that job description and you know what their range is, and kind of fitting your desired and aspirational within those ranges, right? Or having those like three numbers in mind. And that you can kind of carry that all the way through, to the offer, understanding what the company is and sort of like those non-monetary elements to bring to the table as well. And, if that didn't necessarily happen during this initial offer and you've accepted the job, that this is a continual thing as you move through the ranks or do more amazing things in the company that you'd be working for. And so, like, this is an ongoing kind of muscle to develop, and certainly like practice is the best place to flex those muscles. And so if this is something that you want to practice, feel free to grab an appointment and handshake. Keep in touch with our office about like interviews that are coming up. We have lots of resources. We would also love your feedback on today's workshop. That'll really help us to kind of tailor and customize these topics to what you all need. And again, like just to mention sort of those other workshops that we've been topics that we've covered throughout this year and how they kind of play into this larger conversation, right? And how to integrate all of those from career values, from breaking into public health and landscape mapping, researching the industry and the companies, and gaining that confidence within yourself to self-advocate and to be assertive. And so, like, we're at the tail end of the semester. If today's topic was helpful to you and you want to explore it further, listen from a HR professional and an ally to CUNY SPH students. We are having a masterclass guest speaker, the last one of this semester, next week. Actually, next week's pretty busy. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. There's something every night of the week. There's internships with the MTA. There's going to be a CUNY alumni career panel with some really distinguished professionals. And then we'll close up the year, kind of like continuing this conversation. How do we make difficult decisions? Maybe it's balancing multiple offers, right? Or other things. And then kind of like stepping into the summer with kind of thinking about networking and professional brand. And so, kind of keep these on your radar as you're finishing up for the semester. And, as always, like we here at the Career Services are part of a larger support group with the Counseling and Wellness Center, as well as our Dean of Students. So if there are any questions where Dean Roberts can be of support, she holds weekly Wednesday office hours. So feel free to connect with her virtually or in person. And we just hope that we can kind of keep this conversation going and support you in whatever way throughout all the steps in your career journey here at CUNY SPH. So thank you all for being here tonight. I'll stay on for about 10 minutes if there are any other questions or things that people would like to discuss. But otherwise, wishing you all like a strong finish to the semester and hope to see you all again soon. Thanks, everybody. As you head out, please take a few minutes to jot down some things in the survey. And we also have this tradition of a one-word checkout. So as you head out, if you want to drop in the chat, like, how are you feeling after investing this hour together on this topic? That'll be great to hear as well. You're so welcome, everybody. Glad that you're energized and motivated. It's wonderful. And that you're more confident, so important. And feeling prepared, that's great. Yeah, anybody with any other questions?